In the next 10 years, I would really like to learn how to trust better in relationships.
I'd want to learn how to make myself want to maintain a relationship.
Ideally, I'd like to learn how to have one without ever fighting, to have the perfect relationship, but I don't think that's possible.
How to keep the romance alive after that honeymoon phase ends.
How to show someone that you care about them and how to show someone that you love them without giving up so much of yourself.
I want to learn how it feels to be married and have kids, and how those stresses affect a relationship on a, from a personal standpoint, because I know how my mom's been through them, but I've never felt that.
There are certain threads that are going on in relationships research now that may keep going over the next number of years, but it's always curious to wonder what's going to happen that none of us are studying now. And my one that I'm really curious about is behavioral genetics. I really wonder if 10 years from now that's going to be much more of an issue, and yet right now it's not even on the map. It's not on the radar screen.
For me, the most exciting work that's going on in intimate relationships is interdisciplinary work. That is where people cross-cut two different areas. So, for example, people who work on attachment theory. Nancy Collins, I think, is a wonderful example. She takes the social cognitive approach, she combines it with attachment theory. Another example would be people who join social psychology with evolutionary psychology. And here, I think, a good example is the work of Jeffrey Simpson. Some of his recent work, for example, where he's had women rate to what extent they would be interested in a lunch date with a man. And what he finds when he looks at this research is that the kind of decisions that women make in terms of going out for a lunch date depends on two things. Depends, first of all, on who they're rating, obviously, but it also depends, to some extent, on where they are in terms of their menstrual cycle. The fact that you get these kind of strong effects, I think, is very interesting, and that is a good example of how blending questions and topics and using theories that come from different domains in psychology can be enormously productive.
Social psychology in general and relationships researchers in particular are always hit with the issue, oh, don't we already know this? Couldn't my grandmother have told me this? People sometimes call that Bubba psychology.
If anything, relationship research has busted a lot of myths about relationships. So although people may say, oh, you're just confirming what we already knew, I can rattle off a whole bunch of things that people didn't know. For example, we used to think that the world was divided into homosexuals and heterosexuals, and those were nice, clean categories. Well, now we know that that's not so true. We know that heterosexuals can fall in love with someone of the same sex and vice versa.
What we don't have is a systematic understanding of how it all fits together. And the virtue of that theory, or systematic understanding, is it allows us to answer not just the specific question we're asking, but it gives us a handle, a leverage, to answer any other questions that may come up. So we're trying to get at the laws of nature. I like that phrase, the laws of nature of close relationships. And those need to be precise and basic. In physics, it didn't take Newton to know that apples fall from trees, but it did take Newton to develop the actual formula of how fast they fall and how that changes over time and what the impact is in force. Much of physics was known. We couldn't live if we didn't have physics. And yet the precision of physics required physicists, and it led to tremendous advances in all kinds of practical technology. We're hoping the same thing will be true in relationships. That in studying relationships, finding the laws of nature that govern relationships, we will not only deepen our culture's appreciation of how humans work, but maybe in 50 years from now, relationships will be better. Can you imagine how much better life would be if people's close relationships were even 10 or 20% better? There'd be so much less suffering in the world.
The one thing I would want to tell undergraduates about relationships would be to really keep communication open.
In trying to attract other people, don't work so hard at trying to attract them. Just make yourself a better person, and it will kind of fall into your lap.
I'm a firm believer in you need some single time and this is the best time to figure out kind of who you are and what you want to do and play. And, you know, dating's fun and you know, not so serious.
Don't be too, you know, lax or stupid about choosing your partner. It really can, you know, hurt you and put you in a bad place.
Don't let assumptions crawl into discussions you're having with your partner, because if you don't clarify something and you expect that person to be able to read your mind, I think that's how most arguments start, and then it festers and it just blows up and it gets crazy.
Clarity.
Clarity is key.
If there was one sort of message that I could give people about their relationships, it would be that we have a lot more control over how happy we are in our relationships than we think, through processes such as, you know, how positively you think, whether you interpret your partner's behavior in the most negative way possible, or if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. That oftentimes we'll say, you know, I'm just unhappy in this relationship, it's just not working for me, and this is why, as if we have no control over it. And the way we think about our own relationships, what we sort of put into it, has a big effect on what we get out of it. So we're not just victims of good or bad relationships. We make our relationships good or bad with our behavior and also with the way that we think about them.
One of the major things that contributes to your satisfaction in a relationship is how satisfied you are as a person. Even if you get divorced, if you're a happy person, you'll temporarily be unhappy, then you'll be happy being divorced. So if you want to make your relationship happier, you have to attend to yourself. If that means psychotherapy, if that means meditation, if that means getting enough sleep at night, so that you're a person who is not depressed, not anxious, the relationship rarely will make you, in the long run, a less depressed, less anxious, low self-esteem person. You've got to do that for yourself and then bring that to the relationship.
Our partners are always a package deal, and we don't get a line item veto. We get the sort of good stuff along with the bad stuff, and learning to accept that and appreciate that is one of the challenges and joys of a long-term relationship.
If you want intimacy, if you want love, then the possibility of facing grief and rejection comes along in the same package. One comes with the other. That's the nature of a human condition. But have courage. Go forward, give it your best shot. And remember that when you face the inevitable problems that will almost certainly arise in your relationship, that it's the way that you handle those problems and difficulties which will really matter and which will count in terms of whether your relationship is successful or unsuccessful.